Hello and welcome back to my tutorial about SFD Scripting. In this video we'll jump into some actual scripting, so we'll write some actual code. If you have never written any code in your life before, then it might be worth checking out some C# tutorials, but if you feel like you can somehow handle that anyway, keep watching. I will tell you about some basics, so hopefully you understand everything you need. And another thing, for those who are a bit more advanced, I highly recommend using the guide, the scripting guide in the Mythologic Interactive forums in the Getting Started with Script API section. There are 20 basically tutorials made by Gurts, so check those out. And for us, let's start with some basics of scripting. So SFD Deluxe uses C# as its language. So well, it's a language that is object oriented, which means there are objects that are representing things, in this case in the game. So for example, there are like tiles in the game, right? And the same is in the code. The code happens in like steps from top to bottom, so this line will happen first, then this line will happen, then this line will happen, and so on. By the way, you can completely ignore all this stuff above this comment and below this comment. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't even get copied when with Seamless. When I compare the code to clipboard, it only copies the stuff in between those comments. So just forget about anything above and below this. Doesn't matter at all. And here is onStarted function. Doesn't really matter what it does. Let's just say it happens when the script starts, right? So let's talk about like three basically categories of commands you can have in scripting. So first thing is commands that do something. I will call them just commands. There are decisions. I actually don't know how to spell that word, so let's not get too hung up on those. And then there is memory. And basically these are three categories that you will need to work with to write any sort of code at all. Let's talk about commands first. For example, game.write to console, or actually let's do show chat message, because that's just nicer. This will say hi, and if we run this bit of code, then it will just say hi in the code. Yeah, you can also ignore all the green lines. They don't do anything, they're just comments. That's comment, like it doesn't do anything basically. So this is a command that says hi into the chat. Pretty simple. Memory, that's a bit more complicated. In C# there are a whole bunch of types. For example, there are a string, which is like a text, and you put your text in these quotation marks. I missed that. Can't type like this. Or there are like an integer numbers. There are floating point numbers, which is basically a decimal is the keyword, but like a more universal type of number. For example, if you want to say there is 1.5 kilos of something, then you need to use float. And these are all stored in the memory in the RAM of the computer. And the important thing is you can basically combine those categories. So for example, you can go here and do game show chat message text, right? So if we run the code to see what happens, as you can see it says hi and hello. Just to be clear, let me type something in the chat. I actually didn't do anything. Let's try that again. As you can see, it says hi and hello. Okay, to explain what's happening, we are saying that we should put into memory, we should put a string, so a bit of text. The text is hello and the text is called text. This is its name. This can be whatever I want. So for example, eating. Let me get rid of this so it's not confusing. For example, like this, right? Let me start just with a line so we know it's the new code. So as you can see, it says hello because the hello is stored in the memory, and inside of this memory is the text saying hello. And we are saying that that bit of memory is called a greeting. This entire concept is, by the way, called variables. Basically, we can have bits of memory containing some stuff, and then we can use that stuff in the memory. That is quite important to understand, so I hope you do. And the last thing is decisions. Or it's not really only decisions, it's more of a control what is happening or how many times it's happening. It's a whole bunch of things, and in this category there is, for example, an if statement. And let's say if we have a number, and the number is 15, then let's do, oh yeah, it's an integer, and if the number is 15, we will say the number is 15, and oops, if it's not 15, so else. We'll say the number is not 15. Okay. So if we paste that in the chat, in the script, then we'll say the number is 15 because the number indeed is 15. But if we change it to like 10, for example, it will say that the number is not 15. This sound is really loud there. Let me just turn off the startup sequence so it's not so annoying. Yeah, so that's a condition. So basically it makes a decision of if this should happen or if this should happen. Okay, that's the three basically categories that we will be using in our code. So another key concept to understand in for scripting is objects. Objects are basically, they are kind of similar to variables. So we can have like, let's have a crate, and you see the crate has some properties like if I hover on top of the crate, it says it has size of 16 and position of 32, 24, or if it's on the ground, it has a position of 32, 8. The same we can say in the chat, so let's do game dot show chat message, and we will somehow need to find this box. So let's call this a box, and let's tell the game to fetch an object for us, which is a box. So game.get object, which is called box, and we will say box dot get world position. This is quite complicated, but I want to show you what's it all about. So let's just run to see what happens, and it says 32.8, the same as in the editor, because that's where the box is. And how exactly that works is that we have we have a game, and in the game there is this box, right? And we it's kind of hard to explain, but just this gets the box, which means we now in the code, this box represents this box, right? So the stats of this box, like its position for example, is in information which is in memory of this box. And when we say get world position to string, the toString bit just makes it so we can type it in the chat, because in memory it's stored as like numbers or something, but we need it as text, so we say toString, and the get world position basically tells us the position of the box. So yeah, that's why it says 32.8, because that's where the box is. That doesn't really explain what an object is, but the box has a whole bunch of properties. If I type box and dot, you can see all the different properties the box can have and all the functions you can call on it. You can see the same stuff in the API. So if I go to, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about this. When you click on the thing in the map editor, you can see it has scripting something, right? Most stuff has just iObject in there, but for example a spotlight crate will have a spotlight crate here, or some markers will have that it's an object trigger, or in this case specifically object disable trigger, for example, and it's basically the type of the object. So a crate is just an iObject. So iObject is like the most simple object in the game, basically, and it has some basic properties like a position, a rotation. Right, if I turn it, it says an angle of 315 degrees, for example. And it has just a bunch of properties. And to access those properties, you need to somehow get the information from the game. In this game is using this function, and store it in the variable of type iObject, because that's what the editor says it is. And we name that a box. It's very similar as in the example before, where we had let's say string text is equal to something, right? It's basically the same thing, the difference being that text is just a very basic type. It just represents some letters, but this iObject is quite a complex object. It has all sort of properties, right? So for example, a unique ID. So let's actually use the unique ID. Unique ID dot to string, we can actually check the ID in the editor. If we hover over it, it says ID 17, and if oh, it says 2. That's actually very interesting. Oh wait, that's actually not how the ID works at all. Yeah, it says 2 because it's like a second object or something. Okay, that was a terrible example, but we can, oh yeah, we can get its name. That's much better. So it says it's a crate 00, which is exactly what the object is. The name is the property of that box. I really don't know if I did a good job explaining this or not, but hopefully I did. And now you can understand the basics of objects. So it's basically just a bunch of properties stored in memory. That's it. Okay, and yeah, up to this point I was just saying or writing them the properties in the chat, but we can also change the properties. So for example, the object has a velocity, for example. If we check the API, it has this set linear velocity function. So we will use that. Linear velocity is just like how fast the object is going. So let's do box dot set linear velocity, and we'll make a new vector. Vector basically is like two-dimensional thing which says like the same as this world, right? There is like this vertical axis which is blue and the horizontal axis which is red, and the vector basically says like some two numbers, which in this case will represent how fast it will be going to the right, for example 0, and how fast it will be going upward, for example 10. And if we use that and start the game, then you see the box jumps upwards. Okay, so I think that's enough for this video. That's some basics of how to like the basics of coding in general. Hopefully in the next videos we will do something more interesting than just jumping boxes and typing stuff to chat. So see you in those.